26, 2021. This is the Arlington County Board of Equalization hearing. There are 5 cases on the agenda. The first case, excuse me, is RPC Economic Unit 1802402A. The property is located at 2250 Clarendon Boulevard. We have Mr. Jeremy Chitlick here on behalf of the owner. Mr. Chitlick, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about the property, sir.
All right, thank you. Sue Ross is with me as well. She's on the screen. I don't know if you can see her or not, but she might chime in on certain points here. She works alongside of me in our office. So I'm just going to skip to what we affectionately call page 3, which is actually page 5 of the packet, which is the side-by-side here. The property is 2250 Clarendon Boulevard. This is when we're sitting in the BOE office and you look through the window, it's the apartment that you see. Transport ourselves back 2 years when we were in person hearings. What happened in this case is the 2020 income came out and it was a drop. This property has a sizable amount of retail, and the rents are lower. So this one's unique. It's not just a situation. This is an equity residential case. I know we've all talked about the expense issues there. This does have a bump in expenses, but nothing really overly dramatic. This wasn't one where Chris asked for a bunch of information and didn't get it. He got everything that he needed and what was asked. But this one's unique in that the GPI that the assessor used is extremely overinflated. I mean, the incomes over the GPIs, column 7, over the last 3 years are 13.0, 13.3, 13.4, and now 13.3. And the assessor's using 13,442,918. And I would normally say, well, we don't blame them because they didn't know that at the time, but that's from the test. The original, they were using 13.5, higher than the property's ever done in a GPI level, and then saw that the GPI is 13.3 and dropped it essentially to the 2019 value. The 2019 GPI, which is higher than the 17, higher than the 18, higher than the 20. As it flows down, you'll see if you add up the 2 column Fs, you get to a number of 12 million, almost 12 million 9. I'm sorry, almost 12 million 8 when the actual is 12 million 6. And this again isn't a situation where, well, the vacancy is 12% because it's showing up. The vacancy was only 4%. So the vacancy they're using is even higher than what the actuals were. And then you flow down even further to your NOI. The actual NOI is 8.6. They're using 8.6 plus the commercial with an additional $640,000. So on this case, the total NOI that's being used is 925, and the actual was 866. And I understand that they don't like how we reported some of the common area repairs. If we were in the building, we could if we were in the BOE office, we could walk over and see there's nothing that's happening at this property that's causing an increase in rents or made the building nicer. In fact, you'll notice that the GPI for the property is dropping. It was 11.4 back in 2017, and now it's 11 million. So if they're really putting in all this money every year and renovating the property to make them nicer, you would think that would result in higher incomes when in fact the incomes are dropping year over year. We've talked about what these common area repairs are and their turn cost. They're not updates, they're not renovations, they're not permits, they're not anything major. These are every year over year capital. They were 1.4, 1.1, and 1.8. Those are normal trends over the last 3 years. I understand 2017 was different, but as you all recall, 2017, it was reported differently, and we were told if we wanted it corrected, we need to report it correctly. So started reporting correctly in 2018, in 2019, in 2020, and you'll see that those expenses, nothing is really out of whack. 32% expenses for a property that's 32 years old is not abnormal at all. This property has again a sizable amount of retail. So I was gonna say that's a fast 8 minutes, but I don't think that's the buzzer. So that's what we have in this case. I can go through the details. I know you all have a 211-page packet that I'm sure you've read front to back. Our page is in there, or our analysis is in there that talks about the specifics of the property, starting on of the packet, page 70, page 68. You'll see a picture of the property. Again, you all know it very well since it's right across the street from where we used to meet. 396, and it's a B-class high-rise apartment building. And it really comes down to the income. I think what we call page 3, but page 5 of the packet does a very good job of showing that the assessor just missed the mark on this one. So ask that you consider the actuals Our numbers are actually a bit higher than the actuals, just by about $100,000, but we'll call it $50,000. But and I know our cap rate argument has not carried all that much weight, but if you take our numbers, our appellant numbers with the assessor's cap rate, it's a sizable and reasonable reduction. So that's what we have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Bailey for the county, please.
Good morning, board. I will be speaking on behalf of the department for this case. As we continue on the summary sheet, which is page 5, you will see we have outlined in our comment section at the bottom of the page some expenses that stand out to us. As we pointed out with these properties, and in particular properties owned by this particular appellant, it seems that we always have to ask for questions about these line items: common area repairs and miscellaneous repairs. This is not new for this year. This is something that's been going on for the past few years. And so I just want to clarify. The reason we ask for questions is because it is DREA's responsibility to protect the data and to validate the data. And it so happens that the particular line items where the information seems to increase over the years are line items that we ask for more specific details. When I say we ask for more specific details, on our instructions attached to these INEs, we state, please specify. This is not a category for appellants to just dump whatever expenses they want to put in there. This is a category where we say we know that common area repairs are made, but we need to know what you consider common area repairs. Are these repairs or are these capital improvements? The agent just stated that these are turnover costs. We asked the board to do what we couldn't do, and that's get the answers as to what was done as far as turnover, what was spent as far as turnover. These are the answers that we seek when we ask for specific details. When you look at, again, the comment section, the common area repairs were around 280 some thousand in 2017, 252,000 in 2018, dropped down to 128,000 in 2019, and increased to 829,000 in 2020. That is a $700,000 increase from 2019 to 2020. That is actually $162,000 higher than 2017 to 2019 combined. So when you look at the summary sheet, line item 14 is where most of the discrepancy happens. If you look at 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020, that is a dramatic increase. When we look further, again, the main reason for the increase is for common area repairs. When we look at the details given for this, there are no details given. This information is provided by the appellant themselves, where they do not provide any information. So we ask that if you take in consideration this $700,000 increase for common area repairs, at least get the details as to what was done for these common area repairs. What was the work that was done? How much was spent? And then analyze, is this truly a repair or is this capital expense? I think other than that, if you look at page 5, our apartment rents, I mean, we kept it at the 2021 assessment level. We didn't make any changes there. We adjusted parking some, we adjusted rub some, and you'll see that on the test. So our GPI slightly decreased on the apartment side. As far as the retail rents, we left our retail rents at the same level after doing a retail rent roll analysis. That information was provided by the appellant as well. I think it starts on page 121. You can see that they get about $58,000 a month for the occupied space. So we believe that the retail rent rate that we're using is reasonable. In the test, we did remove the pass-through calculation for the retail units. That was a change that you'll see on the column F, revised commercial. We increased the expenses, and if you look at the combined expenses in the test column with the revised column, It is around 3.5 million, which is in line with 2018 and 2019, which came in at 3.5 and 3.5. The 2020 year is higher, but again, we had questions about the miscellaneous repairs. As Chris has done all year, he's reached out to the appellant about these issues. I myself worked this case and I did not send an email because Chris hasn't been successful in getting the answers. And again, when you look at the I&E instruction form that is filled out, and which is also attached to the document when you download it from the internet, it states that we would like for you to specify what are your common area repairs, what are your miscellaneous repairs. That's not provided by the appellant. Again, this I&E form is not new. We've had it for years. We've had the instructions attached for years. So in our opinion, the owners just choose not to provide that detail. Again, we ask that if you do take into consideration the 2020 numbers and the $700,000 increase in miscellaneous repairs, just get the details. Verify that these are actually valid expenses. After all the information that we had on hand was analyzed, we proposed a reduction from $140,525,300 to $136,742,300. That's what we asked the board to vote on or to adopt as the new 2021 assessment value. If you have any questions, I'm here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both. Questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, what is the tax exempt portion? There's a line item for that.
It's a ground lease. Irving could, I think it might be best for Irving to go into that.
This property, as Mr. Chitley stated, it is the courthouse plaza, which is owned by the county. The land is owned by the county. The lease is under 50 years as far as remaining term. So we have to allocate 2% each year to taxable to a taxable account. So I think on the, let me double check. If you look at the cover sheet, page 1, parcel 18004071, I believe that is the tax, that's the tax exempt parcel. So the 30,016,600 as far as the proposed number is what is tax exempt. And that is, when you look at page 5, that is the red figures that is being deducted to get down to the 136. So again, I should have corrected myself. So if the board votes on this revised value, the total value for the property would be the combined indicated total value, which is line 21. Parcel ending in 071 receives the tax exempt portion, which is the highlighted red. The taxable value that goes to 040 and 066 is what I just quoted as the 136,742,300. Sorry for the confusion on that.
Yeah. My suggestion would be, once we get to a final value, maybe Irving and I can talk afterwards and get with Rosa to say, here's the part of this that comes off as taxable or not taxable. Because the main thing that we're talking about here is the total value, and then the taxable part of it is a matter of fact, not opinion. It's a percentage of the total.
Okay, so we're looking at it as if there was no ground lease, and then you guys make the adjustments after the fact.
If you're comfortable with that, yes, and we could just
Okay.
Okay.
Yep. Just check.
All right, other questions? Mr. Meth.
I have a question for the appellant. You started out your 8 minutes with saying that you have provided all information that was requested by the department.
Correct.
And in the department's 8 minutes, they said, we want to know more about common area repairs and miscellaneous repairs because they seem higher than the trend, but they didn't get anything. So
right.
Comment, please.
Right, but then you heard him say, but on this one, I didn't ask for it because we never respond anyway. And I have Sue is on the line, who I'd like to speak to this, but I know we've had cases where Chris has said, look, I sent information request, we responded, I sent a follow-up, and we never responded. And that did happen, admittedly, on, I believe, 3 cases this year. All the other cases, he got everything that he needed in responses. They did not ask a single question on this case. We submitted the INE. We submitted our appeal packet. We got no questions. There are no emails in here of things that went unanswered, any of that. But
Okay.
Sue, I don't know if you want to
answer.
Okay,
Thank you.
Can I respond?
very briefly.
All right, so what I was saying is if you look at the INE form submitted, which is starting on page 118 by the appellant, that area we asked for specification and there's nothing provided. So that's what I mean when I say the county asked, because this is on the form. It's also part of the instructions with a part of the case.
Okay.
They've had this since March.
Okay.
We're in mystery. Thank you.
No, we're not.
Yeah, that's fine. No, I know that the questions there initially. Thanks.
Okay, other questions from board members? No, Mr. Bailey, if you take a minute to wrap up, please.
Yes, so for clarification, as far as this total value, the total assessment for this property was $171,372,300. Our proposed reduction is to drop the value to $166,758,800. As stated in my opening argument, page 118 is the INE form. You will see it says miscellaneous repairs, specify. Common area repairs, specify. There is no specification from the owners. That is what we mean by we asked for this information and was not provided. We go above and beyond in the review process a lot of times and email the agents for this information, but this information should be provided every year when these INE forms are submitted. And that is what we're asking the appellants to do. So we made a reduction based off the information that we had. The board has all this information on page 5, and we ask that you accept the proposed value of $166,758,800 for the 2021 assessment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chitlick, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, they overshot the income alone, the gross potential income on this property by $110,000. They did not ask a single question. We appealed this in March. We sent them their entire appeal packet in March and never heard a word from the county. Nothing. No, this number looks weird. This number looks off. We thought there was no issue because, you know, the 1.8 million looks a little bit high as compared to the 19, but it looks just in line with the 18. The 18, it was 1.4 million. So if it went 1.4, 1.6, 1.8, there'd be no questions. But because there was a drop in 19, all of a sudden there's questions. However, the question was never asked. We do not fill out the INE. This INE goes to the corporate headquarters, and somebody at corporate fills out a 4-page INE and does it for 500 properties across the country. And then to say, yeah, but they did it wrong, so we're not going to consider it. Every other case, they send us an email and say, explain these things. And I understand there were a couple cases where we didn't respond to their liking, but that shouldn't be held against us. Irving made a point of, well, we never respond, so why even ask? That's completely false. We respond all the time. And Chris could testify that in future cases. We could show you that in future cases today. But to say that, well, they know we're not going to respond, so what's the point, is a joke, really. The numbers are in line. Their income that they're using, revising, after learning that the income's 8.6, is $7.2 million. I'm sorry, $9.2 million. It's just not supported at all. Last year we came in and said things are bad, retail's bad, COVID's hurting, and they said, see us next year, show us the numbers. Well, here are the numbers. If the numbers go back up, then next year the value goes back up. But for this year, the numbers are showing 8.6. There's no reason to value this property as 9.2 because Irving didn't like something he got back in March and decided not to ask us a question. Again, they've had this entire appeal packet in front of them for 7.5 months and have done nothing about it. And just to say, well, we don't trust it, we don't believe it. Again, if the 2019 number was 1.6, there'd be absolutely no questions. They didn't mention that the administrative payroll is down $200,000. Some of the other numbers are all down. Utilities are down $40,000. Why is that? Well, it's there. The numbers are there. The numbers are there. They're promised. They're certified that it's the whole thing. So if they have questions, ask them, but don't just say, well, you wouldn't answer, so why bother? It's like me saying, I'm not going to answer because you're not going to change it. That's not how it works. So the numbers show a solid reduction should be given here. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. What's everybody think? Mr. Hoffman.
I'll start on the easy part. I think I would look at the appellant's pro forma for commercial, because the rent rolls, there's 10% vacancy. That's existing, that's documented. That was as of the first of the year, and I would say to use the 10% vacancy would probably be a fair assessment of the retail. That's really what jumped out at me as something that I could actually make a change on.
And so just to make sure that I'm following your logic, so you're going with the apartment portion of the revised?
On column G, commercial, I think that the indicated total value, I could get with that. They're using the right cap rate. They've just changed the vacancy to 10%, which is what the actual vacancy is at the property.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they have another expiration coming in 21, and it's a restaurant, and who knows what they're going to do. So, you know, I think that's fair. I mean, it's a change of about 500,000, but as far as the apartments go, you know, I think it came down over last year. I don't really think it needs to come down much more.
Okay. Other folks? Mr. Matzkin.
Greg, I'm sympathetic to edging this NOI down a bit and valuation down, truly, because that's what I feel. But I always got to have a number that's dependable. But we only change historically for sitting here, increase vacancy rates when it's a long-term egregious vacancy. Do we abandon the guideline and go to something higher, bigger, and thereby, of course, reducing the NOI? Why, if I'm wrong, please, any of you guys say that, but I don't know why you would pick that here, because this isn't long-term egregious trend. I don't want to put you on the spot. I just
I just look at it like it's pretty clear. There's a rent roll. There's 10% vacancy. It's not a very complicated property. If I had to put an appraisal on it, I would probably look at the existing vacancy.
All right, fair enough. There's probably no wrong answer. Okay, I'll let it go. I hope somebody else has a question or comment.
Okay, Mr. Penrod.
Hey, good morning. Well, to be honest, I think I'm okay with the revised assessment the way it is. I don't think this is new for the appellants. You know, they've been instructed many times to provide specified information on the expenses. And it's not the first time that we're seeing this. It's not the first time that we are dealing with this issue. And if they know that the expenses, especially this miscellaneous stuff, like we said before, you know, they can list outside repairs, but, you know, outside repairs could mean smaller repairs or big capital expenditures. And I'm also with the opinion that, you know, if we're doing assessments and we need to equalize them, we need to make sure that everybody's treated the same. I think we should keep the commercials the way it is. I don't think that, you know, Ken is mentioning, it's not something that is going to be, you know, for the next 2 or 3 years at that rate. So I'm okay with the assessment the way it is, the revised.
Okay, Mr. Matzkin.
Thank you. Very, very quickly on the expenses, the form is clear, and I'm sympathetic to these huge landowners that have one software program that fills out tax forms. But I'm not sure that I'm convinced that what the county is asking for, you know, you made an expense, what is it for, is unreasonable. And obviously it's pre-printed, excuse me, it's provided up front. And we have this discussion with lots of big landlords all the time, and probably small landlords too. And although it's a good courtesy and due diligence of the department to say, you didn't tell us, you didn't fill out all these sub-item explanations, please do so. If they missed one, they missed one. Nonetheless, the question's there, and it seems to me it's on the property owner to provide reasonable input in order to make an intelligent assessment. So I'm ending up where Jose is.
Okay, Mr. Yates.
Well, I'm okay with the revised at the end of the day. The county did come not 32%, but they did come down on their number a little bit, or went up on their percentage a little bit. I was more curious about the income, but I don't think it's that far off at the end of the day.
Okay. Ms. Hogan?
I'm good with the assessment the way it is.
Okay. All right. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to 166,758,800.
Okay. We have a motion and a second by Mr. Matskin. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it is 5-1 without Mr. Hall. The county's revised assessment of 166,758,800 is confirmed, and that's before any of the exempt property portion subtractions. You can work that out.
That's already been worked out since you took column F. Sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
What is it?
Since you took column F, that number is already set. If you had taken a number between the two, we'd have to calculate it, but Irving already has that number on there, so it comes to 136,742,300.
We just confirmed 166,758,800. Thank you. Moving on to the next case. RPC 34027-063 at 3535 South Bell Street. Mr. Chitlick for the appellant, please.
All right, thank you. Looking at this, I thought this was good news, but I guess maybe it's bad news. But this is very similar to the last case where we submitted information. There's nothing big outstanding, no question. This is a different ownership group. And instead of just taking column E, the assessor today before the board recalculated column F and said, you included $65,000 too much. So we're going to take that out. The numbers are there of column E. This property, to understand where this property is, while the last one sat directly across on the metro from the board, this property sits in Potomac Yards. We've had this property in the past. The property faces an office building. On the other side of the office building is a water treatment facility. It's not metro accessible. It's kind of next to it as a development site. You've got the other complex there, that's the Harris Teeter. In the past, we said, look, the income's hurt by this. There's more risk. And they said, well, you bought the land. You built it there, so live with it. But they bought the land there for much less than you would buy the land somewhere else to build it. So it's not like all apartment buildings once built are worth the same thing. Yet the cap rate's the same as if it was. The property has struggled because of those issues. But again, starting recently, there's been a lot of recreations of this is what we see. We don't like some of your numbers. We've gone through the appeal. You have our packet there. There was a revision done by the assessor that gave us a $80,000 total reduction on the revised. But the big thing with this property is it's not prime location for Arlington. It's actually I think in compared to Arlington, it's a pretty poor location. So Chris asked some questions. We responded to them. He emailed Sue. Sue responded. We appreciate when the assessor reaches out and asks questions, and try to respond when we can, and typically do. It makes it a lot harder when they get the information in March, don't ask anything, and then come beforehand and said they don't believe us. So there's a picture of the property. The overhead, I think, is a very good picture on page 38 of 145. You'll see the vacant lots to the north. To the east is the parking lot for the airport, but that's on the other side of the Amtrak tracks and the Metro tracks. And then on the other side, those white towers and those things you'll see is the Arlington Waste Pollution Control Center. So if you want to live by a property that has great access to a train, not get on the train, but see a train, or great access to an airport, not get on a plane, but see planes, and have all the cars, and then also great summer smells in a water treatment facility, this is the one for you. And I think that the numbers are showing that. And there should be a reduction because of some of those negative factors. that this property has that none of the other properties that we're talking about, or I think that the board is seeing in front of them, have. So they're running as efficiently as they can, but the numbers are there and you see it. And I think there's an added risk on cap rate on this one more than any other case in Arlington because of those negative factors. And that's why the land here is worth less. How many land development sites in Arlington do you have that just sit there untouched for 10 years? It's very rare, but that's because there's some issues with this land site. And those should be counted as additional risk, and there is additional risk here. So ask you to review that and look at that, and let me know if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. Good morning, board members. Good morning, Mr. Chitlick. Good morning, Ms. Ross. So we're speaking about Camden Potomac Yards. We're sure the board members are aware of this. As Mr. Chitlick's testified, you've seen this years, I think last 3 or 4 years at least. We'll start with the land issues in the sense that it's a bit disingenuous showing that picture. I think Mr. Chitlick knows, and I hope the board is aware, this property has been heavily developed. This site has been heavily developed since that picture has been taken. There's at least 2 new apartments, the Clark and the Sir. The land directly north of that is already as part of a phase site development plan. And again, as the board is probably aware, just south of this is where the new Virginia Tech and future conference center, et cetera, is going to be. So I'd say it's actually quite well located, especially again, given everything that's popped up around it. Lidl's headquarters is across the street from it. They bought another site just to the north of it. Essentially, every land that's allocated around this property has been used. In regards to the property itself, as we saw last year, this property increased its gross potential income in a pandemic year. That's 4 years in a row of apartment revenue increases. We did see a slight uptick in vacancy, just over 1% increase, but again, very much a stabilized property, less than 5%, 17, just over 5% in 18, and under 4% in 19. Again, stabilized. I'd note too that this property, if you look at operating years 17, 18, 19, operating expenses very well stabilized. As Mr. Chitlick noted, once we get these forms, we do notice an increase, in this case, an increase of 86% maintenance and repair for 2020. As Mr. Chitlick testified, I did reach out to Ms. Ross, asked about that increase of over $500,000 in HVAC repairs, and was told that this was for a line item of electrical and AC maintenance, just over $460,000. We do believe that that's mostly associated, if not entirely associated, with permit M21636, which is the replacement and installation of 2 50-ton commercial-grade rooftop units for heating and cooling. Again, by definition, this is not an annual repair. This is not something that's going to be done annually. This is not required for the maintenance of that issue of that line item, but actually with the replacement of. And again, that's not to confuse the issue. We don't feel that this is something that shouldn't be counted per se. It's that it's a capital expense. This is not an annual operating expense necessary for the income. This is something that was done beyond and above and beyond your annual operating repairs. So this was, again, a replacement cost, a capital expense, as we've done all year, as we've done really the last couple of years. And as we've talked about earlier, and we'll talk about in coming cases, the whole point of getting I&Es is to be able to discern what is an annual operating expense and what may be a non-allowable operating expense, in this case, a capital improvement. We do believe we established that, as you can see in the comment field and in column F of the summary sheet. We did reconstruct that with stabilized HVAC expenses that had been seen in years 17, 18, and 19. We do believe that was prudent. We would point out that that would still indicate a 6% increase over what was reported for the subtotal in 2019. We do believe that if you do that and you look again at the operating expenses that were listed for years 17, 18, 19, you see they fit in well and still call for a 4% increase year over year. That being said, the resultant net operating income, again, is very much part of the stabilized effort, as you can see. This was net operating income increase in 17, 18, and 19. We do see that the 2020 drop obviously was accounted for by the increase, slight uptick in increase in vacancy and concessions, and again, an increase in operating expenses. We just asked the board to look at it the way we do and to smooth out the extraordinary expense, in this case, the capital improvement of almost $465,000 for, again, a 2-ton heating and cooling rooftop commercial grade tower. So that being said, we do believe our revision, in this case, it's a revision, and that is to note that there is a bid rate that we neglected to add on January 1. So to be clear, we're using the term revision lightly, in that it's, again, a difference of about $60,000 or so. Yeah, just about. But again, we want to highlight and make sure that we get the accurate taxes applied to this property. So given the fact that, again, looking at the property, if you look at what the county put out for the year 2021 assessment, you'll see that we underprojected income by over $400,000. We underprojected effective gross by almost $300,000. And again, if you use our reconstructed expenses, we did underproject by almost $140,000, but that still led to a projection that's much in line with what's been achieved at the property, and almost $150,000 less than what was achieved if you use column F. If you have any questions, please do ask. But again, to be clear, we do recommend that you, in this case, confirm the revision of $135,586,100. Thank you. We're available for questions.
Okay, thank you both. Okay, questions from board members? Mr. Yates?
To the county, often on properties that have heavy road traffic, other things that do impact that specific location's value different than other similar properties, would the railroad lines, the sewage treatment, would that not fall into that kind of thought? I mean, there is an impact there.
We would argue differently, Mr. Yates. And again, if you look at the income line, you'll see that the property's had no trouble in achieving its income. And in fact, it's increased it year over year over year over year. It's stabilized, so you would think that there would either be an impact on the market rents it's getting or on its occupancy. Occupancy is stable, if not dropping, short of last year. And again, apartment income has increased year over year over year over year. Sorry. I'm sorry.
Would the thought is that yes, the income's there, but and it is increasing. I agree with that. Could it have been higher if it had a different location? And that's the impact of the percentage.
Yes, sir. I think we'll know better, and I don't want to sound as if that we're putting it off to another year, but I think we'll know better now that we have 2 other apartments located literally adjacent to it. We have the Clark and the Sir. So now we'll have 3 apartments, some 900 units or more, that we can actually look to see, is there in fact a impact from either the VRE or the water treatment plant. Again, it's a business decision. Obviously, these owners thought that it made sense to put multifamily units right next to the property that the appellant is claiming is ill-located. I think we'll see in the next year or two what we've seen with pre-lease up at both the Sir and the Clark has been very good.
Okay.
So it's tough to say if the location for on Route 1 is a benefit or the location next to the water treatment and VRE is a deficit.
And just to add a little bit, we will also have to see, is it the proximity to the metro that has a bigger impact on the property? Because right now this property does not have a metro cap rate. It has outside metro cap rate. So when we look at the sales, it would be, is it lower in value because it's not close to the metro, or is the area affected by the water treatment plant? We haven't had many sales near the water treatment plant for apartments because for a while this has been the only apartment. Next to it has been the condo building. But we do have 2 new apartment buildings in the area, and we can have more data based on that, based on those properties being built.
I think there are no apartments by the water treatment because nobody else built an apartment by a water treatment facility.
2 buildings next to the Camden.
Until now, right. And 900 new units are up. Mary's telling me to be quiet, but she's muted. I can tell, so I will be quiet.
Any final questions? Mr. Matzkin.
Yeah, I have a question for the department. I want to avoid all this water treatment stuff. I mean, the numbers are the numbers, it's stable. Maybe if they built it closer to the metro, Crystal City metro stop, they'd be getting bigger numbers, but these are consistent and I think they wash out. So my question is about operating expenses. Understanding about the $500,000 that appear to be capital improvements, because you know enough to make that determination safely. I was wondering why in your revision you edged, well, and not only revision, but probably from the average of the last several years, forgetting about the $500,000, you've edged down a bit in your operating expenses down to 2.1. And we don't have any constituent numbers here in G1. Could you spend a couple of seconds on why that edged down in your revision?
Well, yeah, so
did you see something that needed to reduce?
no, Mr. Minskin, yeah, I probably complicated things a bit. My revision is actually literally the same. It's just the addition of the bid column, the bid tax. So there was no revision made. The only quote unquote
What
revision.
column? I'm sorry, you didn't come through.
So column F is reconstruction of 2020, but the quote unquote revision that I made is the same 2020 projection we did January 1. It's just with the addition of the bid tax.
Bid tax.
Yeah, so there we didn't adjust the operating expense as well. In fact, what I was saying was in my wrap up was if you it's one of these classic things. If we were to adjust the operating expense up a bit, we'd ask you to look and see how low we are in our income projection. So we do acknowledge that we're a little bit low on our operating expense projection, but again, we're low on income projections. Does that make sense, sir?
Yep, no, I understood that. Thank you.
Sir.
Okay, any final questions? Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, just real quick for the appellant. The rent roll shows Commonwealth Medical Center expiring in January. Did they move out at the end of the year, or are you aware are they still in the building, or did they move out?
I don't know. Let me look. I believe they are there. They are still there.
Okay.
Yeah, that was that's the medical space. The space next to it has been vacant for 20 years. But yeah, they're still there as of today. It's an urgent care, so they made it through.
Okay, any final questions? No, Mr. Chikas, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yes, ma'am. Again, we've seen this property before. We've seen increases on the income 4 years in a row. Again, we acknowledge a uptick in vacancy and concession, but again, years 17 through 19 showed it's a stabilized property. Again, very stabilized operating expenses 17 through 19. 2020 saw a 23% uptick. We were able to isolate that as a near $460,000 one-time capital improvement for cooling and heating towers at commercial grade. We did reconstruct those out. We do believe that our revision, again, in this case, adding in the bid rates equate to a value of $135,586,100. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chitlick, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Sure. Looking at this on the common sense side of this, Chris said the income's up, the income's down, the NOI's down. It was 7.7, reported was 7.2, even he recreated it 7.6. The income's down. There's a pandemic. The value's up $5 million. The assessment is up $5 million. The assessment was $21.9 million in 18, $24 million in 19, $130 million in 2020, and now it's up to $135.5 million. It's up $5 million from last year with the NOI down, and we're in a pandemic. His expenses that he's now using, I know he said, well, my revision, I didn't actually revise it. His expenses that he's using are lower than what he recreated. They're lower than that they were in 2019. They're just, he's missed the mark on this. And the results, again, looking at it on a common sense picture, is this property worth $5 million more than it was last year? In a non-pandemic year with the NOI down, the answer is no. But when we add on the pandemic, most cases we're seeing properties have been reassessed less. For some reason, this one's higher. The other factor is he mentioned, well, you got 2 new buildings. Well, that means there's 900 new, nicer units that are direct competition for anybody that's like, you know, my market where I want to live, is close to a water treatment facility. This is my only option. Well, now you have other options apparently, and those options are going to be nicer. It's just common sense side of this shows this number needs to be much lower than the 2020 assessment.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. Where are we? Mr. Metzgen.
First thing I always do when I look at these cases is to see what the department's recommendation is vis-a-vis for assessment, vis-a-vis last year's assessment. And I think this is the first apartment building I've seen where there was an increase. And I said, well, clearly there's by definition something wrong because of not sewer water treatment plants, but pandemic and people living in basements and not in high-rise apartments. But and so we have asked questions about the income vis-a-vis the operating expenses, and this really is an incredibly stabilized property. And I'll reiterate really quickly that the externalities around that building just don't count. The rents are the rents, and people are paying them. If it were farther north, maybe they'd be higher, maybe the vacancy rate would be lower, but this is consistent with itself, which is all we're worried about. And the final thing that Mr. Chica said in his wrap-up was that that the estimate of income was a bit low, and admitted that the estimate of the operating expenses was also low. We've seen this many times. They tend to cancel each other out. So surprisingly, an almost a 3% increase in this one case seems to make sense.
Okay, other folks? Mr. Hoffman, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to point out that we've seen a bunch of other cases that are a little bit further north and a little bit further away from the water treatment facility, and those are kind of in the mid 400s per unit for you know, something that's 20 after the 2000s construction. So there is already a pretty significant discount, almost $100,000 a unit to the assessment here. So I'm actually good with the county's number.
Great input. Thank you.
Yeah, anyone else?
I was fine. I was and still am fine with the county's number. I just wanted to ask the question.
Okay. All right, well.
I'm okay with it. Yeah, I looked originally, I'm sorry, I looked at the expenses, but you know, doing an average and doing giving some credit for that extra $500,000, not for the full amount. I thought maybe the expenses should be increased, but like Ken said, you know, I think the income itself, it's pretty much washes it off. So because I did numbers based on 24% expenses, but it makes a reduction. But you know, when we look at the income, yeah, the income is there. So I'm okay with it.
Okay. I agree. I mean, I did the same thing. So I'm fine with the revised number as well. So, all right, would somebody like to make a motion? Mr. Hoffman?
Okay, I'm motion to confirm the county's original assessment of $135,586,100.
Okay, it's actually the county's revised number.
That's the revised number. Oh, the last one was the original.
Right.
One.
135,586,100. Okay, I'll second that. Do I have all in favor? Aye.
All right.
Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's revised number of 135,586,100 is confirmed. Okay, next up is RPC 25001-022 at 700 South Courthouse Road. And Ms. Ross is going to start this case. So Ms. Ross, you can take your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, ma'am.
Okay, thank you very much. Shawnee Apartments is a mid-rise apartment. Like you said, it's 700 South Courthouse Road. It's in the Penrose area of Arlington, contains 85 units, and it was built in 1961. As you can see, this property is 60 years old and can't compete with newer product that's in the market currently. If you turn to page 5 in our appeal package, you'll see a side-by-side analysis. We use the actual income generated by the property, which was a gross potential income of 0.7 million, with other income at 95,359. The vacancy and collection loss of the property is reported on the I&E survey was 11%, 9.7% or 174,000. The actual expenses were 924,341. The subject had some additional expenses, understandably, because it's a 60-year-old building. Several units required flooring repairs and countertop glazing in order to get them ready to be rented. This all generates an NOI of 711,344, which is the actual NOI provided on the calendar year 2020 I&E survey. The county has overstated the NOI at 990,700. Initially, we had used a 6.28 cap rate, but if you utilize the same cap rate as the county, this would develop a value of 11,855,730. Jeremy, did you have anything else to add? Oh, you're on mute.
Sorry, I put myself on mute so I wouldn't interrupt. The county said, we don't believe all your expenses, so they took them out again and said your actual NOI is 878,000, but then tested it to 990,000. So the reported is 711,000. I believe they asked the questions, got everything they needed on this one. Learned it was actually 878, and now we're saying, but we're going to call it 990. The numbers are there, just like, I mean, I've been told in the last two cases the numbers are there, we got to use them. Well, the numbers are there in this case, and it's pretty glaring, and the assessor has ignored them. So we think that the actuals are the best, and I understand the cap rate struggles here. So the 711,344 is really what should be used as the NOI when you're going through your analysis. That's it.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Chicas for the county.
So this was not one of those where we asked questions and got everything we needed. If you look at page 17 of 74, really this came down to $229,000 of decorating and or turnover that was listed. I do give Ms. Ross credit for the initial questions asked. We did get responses, but again, on page 17, within about an hour and a half of receiving a response on Monday, September 20th, we responded back, can you please ask ownership to detail how $229,000 was spent in 2020 on turnover, and did not hear back. That led us to believe that everything was essentially put at turnover, which would equate to some $2,700 a unit. And this is kind of the problem with trying to extrapolate without getting information back, is that it leads us to question the expenses that were posed to us. So as we've done on a number of these cases, as we'll continue to do without transparency, we did reconstruct the 2020 I&E that we received. And we did this to stabilize maintenance repair that we saw in years 17 and 19. This property is a little unique in that it's not something that's traditionally put forth appeals. You can see in column 17, it's what's called a reconstruct from budget comparison income statement, nothing for 18, a county issued I&E for 19, and a county issued I&E for 2020. If you look at really anything, you'll see that the income went up from 17 to 19, but again, a large jump from 18, so we don't know what happened. Vacancy dropped from 4 to under 3%, again, showing a stabilized property. Effective gross increased by over 100,000, and operating expenses were very stabilized. Again, only 2 years, but that's the information we have. We received 2020, and we saw, as we've seen with a couple of these cases, large increases across the board. There were drop-offs in revenue, to be sure. Apartment revenues down, gross potentials down. There was a large uptick in vacancy, over 5% true vacancy, a little over 3% vacancy in concession. Again, obviously that would have caused a drop in effective gross when put in conjunction with a drop in income. But it was, again, these expenses, 290% increase in maintenance repair as reported compared to historical reporting. That sent up a yellow flag, if you will, or flag. We asked about it again. We know that included that $229,000 in decorating. We just would have preferred a little bit more background into how that was spent. As has been testified by the appellants, this property is listed as 1961 effective age. But I would ask the board, if you're not familiar, either with their website, shawneeapartments.com or CoStar, when you look at the apartments that are being presented, and I get that there's very good chance these are either model units or show units, whatnot, but these are clearly not 1961 apartments that they're advertising. Quartz or Corian countertops, it looks like 42-inch cabinetry, subway tile, obviously updated appliances. Again, that portrays a effective age of almost 61 years. So that's fine that the property is being updated. We expect that to keep up with the Joneses, so to speak, or with market averages. But we just want to know what's going on at the property. I might ask Mr. Bailey, Irvin, to speak a little bit about it, but I believe this is a property that is owned by the Carruthers that are doing some value adds across the county. They have Potomac Tower property that is currently in rehabilitation for tax exemption credits from the county. And I believe this is another property that they actually asked us ahead of time if this was something that they felt was something that would be beneficial to them. Again, this is almost a pure value add play in that this is something with shared laundry facilities, a very small facility for fitness, and again, fairly bare bones apartments. So they did not enter the rehab exemption at that time, but I thought it was telling that they were asking us if they thought that there's a value add play to add 2 new units and then do some conversions. Irving, can you speak on that briefly?
I think you touched on all the points. And you definitely highlighted that these units have been updated, or at least the ones they advertised. I think this property, when we did inspect it during the time period, had parquet floors. As you can see, what they advertise now and is not parquet floors. To give a little bit of information about the 2018 INE, there was a partial interest sale of this property in 2018. I think it's for about 8.5 million, and that information is provided on our worksheet, which is on page 5. So that may be why we didn't get an INE for 2018. Other than that, I think Chris pretty much touched all points about how we approach the valuation of this property.
I'll just briefly, sorry to interrupt you, sir, just briefly touch on again in our reconstruction, you'll see that we did in fact increase our projections for total operating expenses well ahead of what was reported in 17 and 19. But again, more in line with the reconstruction that we added for column F. We do believe again that the resultant NOI is very much in line with what was reported for 17 and 19. And again, 2020 is much more reflection of the increase in vacancy, the slight downturn in apartment revenues, and again, large, almost 35% increase in total operating expenses. Given that even by the owner's own residential rent roll, this property will be 99% occupied as of January 16th of this year. So that basically shows you that the stabilized nature of the property is much in effect. The 9.6% proposed by the appellant is higher than what had been achieved historically, and definitely higher than what the rent roll would suggest. We do believe that a negative 39% year-over-year decrease as projected by the appellant is just too severe. Ours is a negative 11% drop year-over-year, again, much more in line with what was reported in 17 and 19. That being said, we do believe the county should be confirmed in its revision of $16,512,200. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? No? Okay. All right. Any final comments, Mr. Chikas?
No, ma'am. Just we asked the board members to take in part the reconstruction we did, the questions we asked, the questions that weren't answered, and again, look at the history that we've been provided. We do believe that supports a revision value of $16,512,200. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas, take a minute to wrap up. Or I'm sorry, Ms. Ross.
I would just like to mention when Chris asked additional information, I reach out to the client. I don't even have a chance to get responses back, and I already got a letter that they're not changing it. The appeals have been in since March. If they had questions, some clients just don't answer that quickly. The additional, the 228,000 I just explained was for the redoing the flooring and the countertops. As tenants move out, they've had long-term tenants, they have to redo all that. So that's what the 228,000 difference was.
And I mean, even if you recreate it, what I didn't understand from anything Chris said, now we talked about how basically poor the property was and how this owner fixes other properties. I don't know how that's relevant, but even if you use that, his column F is an NOI of 878,000 and he's using 990,000. We have no idea where the 990 comes from. Again, appeals last year, we were told, well, we got to see the numbers that what the pandemic's doing. Well, now you're seeing it and they're ignoring it. And it just doesn't make any sense. We think you should use 711. We thought when we originally got this, he thought you should use 878, but for some reason he's using 990. And again, there's real no explanation of why he still chose to go 110,000 higher than his recreated actual, but we should bring him on investor calls because these big drops in NOIs, he really spins to making them sound like they're a really good thing.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it's just among the board members. What's everybody think? Mr. Hoffman.
I'm okay with the county's reduction.
Yeah, I am too. Anybody else? Mr. Yates? Mr. Yates, your microphone, please.
You know, I'm fine with the counties, just looking at the NOI historically and as it progresses, even the 990. It is declining, but it's a reasonable decline as the property value or the revenue.
Okay. All right, Mr. Metzgen.
This is an incredibly stabilized property, and the assessments down, revised assessments down about 10%, which is a little surprising, the opposite of what I saw in the last case where it was stable and went up a couple of points. I take seriously, though, the operating expenses should be higher because the appellant said that we had an unusual amount of turnouts and we spent $250,000 and or turnovers, I'm sorry, and spent $250,000 to do the normal stuff that we just have to do after people live there for a while. And so I struggled with, well, okay, maybe we should, I don't know if we should take off, increase operating expenses, the whole 228,000, but some reasonable percentage of that. Because, I mean, to me, it's clear. It's turnover, it's painting, it's decorating. I mean, this is normal apartment owner behavior in order to keep the place occupied. But then what I find is it goes down a very stabilized property, maybe 15%. That seems like a big number for a property that is apparently very, because of its placement in the housing market, very insulated from COVID and people, you know, moving to single family basements. So I because I'm confused, I got to end up, even with good quality arguments on both sides, staying where we are. Meaning amount, I guess.
Okay.
Can I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Can even, you know, the operating expenses are still in, you know, they're going up annually and right into the revised. So that's where I don't have a problem with that. I think it's in line with what historically is developing. Well,
2017 through 19, sure, it's gone up, but they had this lump sum in 2020, apparently unusual amount of move outs. That's why I didn't think, you know, we should add on the whole entire move out decorating package. That's why I said vaguely, you know, half. I don't know, $100,000. Because this is an older property. I forgot one thing, however, and I think this is what made my mind. The cap rate is a gift to the owner. There's no way in the world this place is unimproved, forgetting about countertops, but mechanical systems, big, heavy duty capital items, as well as the common area. it is not 1961 building. And so the cap rate is clearly not what it ought to be. And I wouldn't be surprised if department personnel went there and took a long look at the building this coming year. I have something else, but I'll say it later.
Okay, go finish briefly. Okay, well, you're muted. Okay, anybody else? Mr. Penaranda.
Yeah, actually, I was going to make the comment which Ken just touched in his last comment. Yeah, I looked at the expenses too, but I think this building is really getting a big benefit with the cap rate. I just, I've been in the building. This is not a 1961 effective age. The lobbies are, you walk in and they're renovated, as well as the apartments there. So I'm just convinced that maybe the county should take another look or do another inspection and revise the effective age, because if that was increased, I know the cap rate would be much lower. So I'm okay with it.
Okay. All right, well, with no further discussion, then I'm going to move to accept the county's revised number of $16,512,200. Do I have a second? Okay, a motion and a second by Mr. Hoffman. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's revised number of $16,512,200 has been confirmed. I've been asked to take a break, so it's 10:06. So if we come back about 10:11, we will resume and do the final two cases. I would just ask that you turn off your microphones and your cameras during the break. Thank you. Okay. Do we have Mr. Chicas back? I think we've got, yep, we've got everybody back. Okay. All right, moving along to the fourth case on the agenda, Economic Unit 2304104A at 952 George Mason Drive. Ms. Ross, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, please.
Okay, this property is called Centro Arlington. It's a 6-story mixed-use mid-rise apartment, has 366 units and 71,605 square feet commercial space. It was built in 2019. If you turn to page 7 in our Peel package, you can see our assumptions. The gross potential income comes directly from the market rent shown on the rent roll, which was $2,080 a unit per month, which gives us a gross potential of $9,134,640. This property had an unfortunate circumstance of trying to lease up during COVID. The leasing began in September 2019. Please also note that the property is offering concessions in the form of 2 months free rent to lease up the additional vacant space. It's still currently 17% vacant, or 63 units are vacant. For the expenses, we use the Arlington County guidelines of $7,864 a unit. Initially, we had increased the cap rate by 28 basis points. However, if you utilize the same cap rate that the county's using of 5.4, it develops a value of $109,349,620 for the apartments. I did want to note that the actual NOI for the apartments was $4,122,260, which was reported on the 2020 survey. Our actual analysis is utilizing a higher NOI of $5.7 million. For the commercial space, we again use the rent roll with the vacant space being grossed up at $32 a square foot, which gives us a gross potential of $1.9 million. The property is still 11% vacant on our 766 square feet, 7,660 square feet still vacant. So we use the vacancy rate of 11%. We utilize the same expense rate and cap rate as the county, which would be a 13% expenses and 7% cap rate, which would bring the NOI for this commercial space to $1.1 million. And you can see that we're using 1.9, but the actual commercial space that was reported was 1.1. So we're actually under the reported NOI, both on the apartment side and on the commercial side. Just wanted to rephrase that the county's overstating the gross potential that this newly constructed property can achieve. This property is in the Barcroft area of Arlington, which is a little less ideal location than other markets in Arlington. The owners have indicated that they, again, are offering 2 months free rent through the end of 2021 and even into 2022 if they don't lease the units. Due to the virus, they were receiving minimal applications, so they indicated that they may have to provide other types of incentives to lease the space. Considering all the information we provided, we're requesting for a change to the value of $129,884,050. Jeremy, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, just that although we're still struggling, the owners are still struggling to lease this property up, we're getting no lease up deduction from the county. And the county's position has been, well, we only give 1 year. Well, if it still needs lease up on that date, any buyer is still going to consider it. And there are situations where they have given more than 1 year. 400 Army Navy comes to mind where they were struggling to lease it up and the board granted a 2nd year of it. To say, well, we can't give you a lease up deduction this year because you got one last year, yet the property still requires lease up. So a lease up deduction should be given. The most telling thing is the assessment would essentially stay exactly the same if this building becomes fully leased, which is not appropriate. There's added cost, there's added risk, there's added everything involved in order to get from where it is today to column F, really column P, but also column F. Column F is really a best case situation if everything hits like it would, and we're 2 years away from that. So when we come into cases with you, well, before today, when we come into cases in front of you and say, hey, look, the income's down, or it's often, well, we need 2 years of it, we need 3 years of it to see it. Well, how could we possibly be assessed as if this property is fully finished, fully stabilized, fully thriving when we haven't seen it yet? That's what the lease up cost deduction's for, and that's what some of these changes that the assessor hasn't made that needs to be made that's where it should happen. So they've made some adjustments on the retail side, but the apartment still, again, I know you went to the website on the last one, check it out. You could get units for less than they're asking for, and you can get some concessions to take them. They're kind of, in a way, I mean, I'm born and raised in the area. This is a new area to be a desirable one to live, work, play on the 900 block of South George Mason. So it takes some time to create that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chikas for the county, please.
Yes, ma'am. So again, this is one where we reached out to the appellants to ask for more information, and unfortunately did not hear back, at least not to effectuate a change beyond what we projected. If we're looking at the summary sheet, you'll see what looks strange in columns E1 and E2, and that's because we received a statement of income. Now, unlike the other cases we heard today, if you look at page 26 of 152, you'll see that I actually reached out to the appellants on March 16th, some 6 months ago or more. And I said, will the owners intend to submit county I&E forms for the retail and residential components? Quote unquote, all I found in your packet was a consolidated statement of income. So I wanted to be sure that the owner preferred our trying to reconstruct their income statement numbers into our forms on their behalf. Didn't hear back. And then I responded back on September 15th. So again, some 6 months later, essentially saying the same thing. I'm working on your cases that I came across this from the spring. Were you able to get I&Es from the owners, or should I just reconstruct what you gave me? And again, didn't hear back. So rather than even reconstruct, we just literally put in what you see in columns E1 and E2, and it's strange. It indicates no vacancy and concessions, no collection loss, no rent loss. It indicates expenses that don't seem to line up to anything. It wasn't very illuminating, to say the least. It makes sense then that neither the appellants nor us used it in our reconstructions. We went the extra step of actually using the residential rent roll supplied and went through all 366 units to recreate what you see in columns F1 and F2. So we went through the retail rent roll, we went through the residential rent roll. This is essentially a projection based on fact. These aren't even necessarily projections. The only thing that we didn't have quote unquote evidence for was the parking, which we projected, but at a very reasonable $75 a spot, a space, very much what we've seen in the market. And again, parking isn't reported at all, which would be strange unless it's a concession, but I would note that concessions don't show up on the owner's website. And I don't want to speak out of turn, but I believe the appellants used the term today, the vacancy, or at this time, the vacancy is still 17%. It's not what we see. We see that less than half of that and dropping. We see no concessions being offered on the website. We see less than 1% being offered as a total. We see rent increases double digits. Given that we both agree that we're going to use guideline operating expenses, given that the county's taken the time to actually use owner-supplied residential and retail rent rolls to use our revision projections, given that we stabilized that at 6% per guideline, 4% for the retail components, and given that we used guideline cap rates that are applicable to each component, so we do believe that our revision at 147,723,700 is prudent and fair. It does show a 10% increase, but again, this is a property that's essentially in its second or third year of ascendancy, of growth, which we would see if we actually had applicable operating statements or something that we could parse and make sense of. Given that we reached out twice and didn't hear back from the owner's representatives, we do believe that this revision should be confirmed at 147,723,700. Irving, anything you want to add?
No, I mean, I will say that the appellant, what he said was truthful. We have taken consideration below the line deductions in the second year of a property's lease up. We tend to be able to derive that deduction based off income and expense form. As Chris stated, if you look at the information provided in the packet, it was consolidated income and expense questionnaire, income statement, They didn't even really break out the components of the expenses too much. So we didn't use that form. We just made the best projection that we could based off of what we had and just understanding the market. And that's the best we can do in these situations when the information isn't that good. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Metzger.
For the appellant, what was the vacancy rate and percentage on the date of evaluation 1/1/21?
17%. I did want to mention the reason that it was difficult to get additional information is because this company, the owners sold their company mid-year.
Which you probably read about. Weingarten sold to Kite Realty, so it wasn't just a one-off deal. It was a major corporate transfer, which is why we weren't able to get the new owner's information on the buyer's information on the form. So it's not.
I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you off. This is question period. You can tell us about that in the wrap up. Thank you. Any other questions from board members? No. Okay, Mr. Chikas, do you have anything else that you need to add?
No, ma'am. Just again, recognize the due diligence we gave. We worked through the residential and retail rent rolls. We believe this projection is accurate. Other than that, we use guiding guidelines for the lack of information we didn't have. So we do believe the revision should be confirmed, 147,723,700. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Ross, if you take a minute to wrap up, and now you can tell us about that.
Okay, just that the company as a whole was purchased from another company mid-year, so it was very difficult to get the old owners' information from the new owners. I did attempt to several times. It wasn't as if I was ignoring Chris's request. Also, as of January 1, the vacancy was 17%. That may have changed now, and perhaps the new owners don't have on their website that they're offering concessions, but that's what I was told, that they were offering 2 months free rent.
And when a property is that vacant, to use 4% retail and for retail and just assume, you know what, retail is going to come back and 4% vacancy for a property that's 17% and still has vacancy issues today is just not realistic. Pre-COVID, post-COVID, whatever, but a post-COVID retail vacancy of 4% when it's actually 17 really needs to be considered somewhere, and it's not being considered at all in column F in the valuation, whether it's below the line, the cost to get it to 4, or if we bump that 4 up to a more reasonable number, considering the actual.
Okay, thank you. All right, it's just among the board members. Where's everybody on this? Mr. Metzger, go ahead.
Well, I can't ask, the last thing the appellant said threw me a little bit for a loop. I was understanding that the apartments were 17, date evaluation was 17% vacant, but I heard the appellant saying, no, it's the retail that's 17% vacant. And I think there is one space there, a couple thousand square feet that's vacant, but I don't, and it's never been occupied. So now I'm a little bit confused. When it gets to the ownership went over, and we get a lot of recriminations sometimes that we don't get the proper data. Well, I mean, they got what they got, and the department had to make educated projections on what's what. But the company sold, the building sold. The data is there or it's not. So I ignore that, but but I'm mystified on this vacancy, because I was tending to think that we ought to be some little bit of a bottom line deduction, because this is a new building leasing up slowly for whatever reason. But I don't know what the 17% is of. If it's retail, it's no big deal. But there's no questions and answers here, so we're not going to find that out. So I'm at all lost.
Okay, Mr. Yates.
I run very much along the line of Ken. I thought about the below the line, but the fact that I think the county did a good job creating the numbers based on what they were given. And hopefully with the new ownership, they'll provide the information next year and the county can do a better job even. But I'm fine with the revised.
Okay. Mr. Penaranda?
Yeah, I'm okay with the revised assessment as well. I haven't seen anything that the management is offering incentives. The only incentive that I knew that they were offering is the moving fees that they were not charging, and they were also offering the residents to give them a credit, I think $50 or something, to bring other residents to the building. But you know, if they're offering free rent again, because I know they did at the beginning, then you know that's something new. But I'm okay with the revised assessment.
Okay. Anybody else different? All right. Would somebody like to make a motion?
I'll go ahead and move that we reduce the assessment to 147,723,700.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second by Mr. Gates. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, the assessment's reduced to the county's revised number of 147,723,700. Thank you. Okay, and moving to the last case on the agenda is Economic Unit 161803A, 1500 Key Boulevard. And Mr. Chitlick, you can start with your 8 minutes and tell us about this property, sir.
Okay, sure. So as you see, the page 3 here is a little bit different than usual. Again, we've got a situation where the assessor has said, you know what, I don't like your expenses, I'm recreating them. But I don't like them for 2020, but I also didn't like them for 19. I also didn't like them for 18. So he's recreated our 2018 expenses, our 2019 expenses, and our 2020 expenses. And just said, so we just heard, look, put it on our form so we can consider it. And then here we put it on the form and say, yeah, but I don't like what you put on the form. So I'm going to take out certain line items. His claim appears to be that the property's been renovated and there's renovations going on. But I want to point out that the income for the last 3 years for the apartment side is 8.9 million, 8.9 million, 8.9 million. So if this owner is truly spending $5 million in renovating a property and not getting an additional dollar in income, then either Equity Residential is a very poor business owner and you might want to short sell their stock, or maybe they're not actually renovating the property like we've told Chris the last 2 years. If you go into the property's built in 2003. There's not major renovations going on at this property. But to just say, you're doing what I've asked you to do, you're putting on so far today we've seen cases where the income was a bit higher, or the location wasn't quite as good as other properties, or the income was much lower, or the property's being leased up. And I understand I'm used to losing, but not unanimously all the time. And so far it's been a bit unanimous. Here's a situation where we've got 3 straight years of reported income, how they want it reported. And instead of just saying this 1 year is a 1 year bump, I don't agree with it. He said all 3 of these years are a 1 year bump, so I don't agree with it and I'm pulling it all back. It doesn't quite make sense. So the numbers are the numbers, as we've been told in the previous cases. The numbers are the numbers within the INE. The income was 4.4, 5.2, and then again the page 3 is a little messed up. 5.9. We're being valued as if the income's $7 million, because again they don't trust the numbers, they don't believe the numbers. So it's a little frustrating when we do it one way and it's you got to do it our way. We do it their way and they don't like it that way. They ask questions, we answer them, and it's yeah, but we don't like your answers. They ask questions, we don't answer them. It's well, but you didn't answer our questions. It's like we're trying to figure out a way here to get what he needs. But again, this isn't a 1 year bump. This is a 3 year history of it. And I think the big driver to show that there's no major renovation here is that the gross potential income of the property is flat for the last 3 years, completely flat. I mean, it's literally 8.9, 8.9, 8.9. So I just don't see the justification for why the increase here, and why to really throw those numbers out. So that's I just want to check one thing. Yeah, that's pretty much what I have here. Our opinion of value is based off of the historics and the actuals here. This is 1800 Oak. It's a nice property. It's certainly a high rise. So that's one thing we can all agree on today. But the numbers are there and they're showing it. It's a 2003 build, so it's not something that needs to be gutted like Shawnee in order to make it. So that's what we have.
Okay. All right, thank you. Mr. Cheekins for the county, please.
So on page 64 of 211, you'll see an email from the appellant, Mr. Chitlick, in which he states, regarding 2018's INEs, quote unquote, we removed $1.8 million of the common area repairs, which were above and beyond typical expenses because of upgrades done. So that's 2018's numbers. 2019, and that's just 1.8 million that was above and beyond. 2019, we asked Ms. Ross last year, 189% increase in insurance and tax subtotal, what happened there? Can you obtain a profit and loss statement or other internal document showing the income and expense stream for the 2019 calendar year? They said they would let me know. They're working on obtaining that information. I'll let you know what I find out. Then I asked specifically for 2019, can you give me a breakdown of what was spent on common area exterior repairs of 1.526? What about miscellaneous repairs? What was undertaken at the cost of $525,000? So roughly 2,051,000 just in 2019 miscellaneous and common area. We heard back nothing. So I asked this year, can you obtain, basically the same questions again. Can you obtain a profit and loss statement for 2019 and 2020 for me? And then basically another breakdown, going through those numbers again. For 2020, can you please give me a breakdown of what was spent on common area for $342,271? What about miscellaneous? $945,000 in 2020. So another $1.2 million in common area miscellaneous expense with no specificity offered, even with follow-up. So nothing on the INE, nothing on the follow-up 2 years in a row. And then I asked again for 2019's numbers. I did get a breakdown of 2020 in that it was noted that the for breakdown of miscellaneous, it was common area. So we asked 342,000 specifically what was spent. They replied 142,000 was spent on common area and 129,000 was spent on recreational area. Of the miscellaneous 945,000, 729,000 was spent on unit updates. Now, we've heard this literally before. We heard this last year. We asked at this time, what does a unit update entail? We did not hear back. You'll see that in the emails. I believe we heard back last year, but I won't put words in the appellant's mouths. But I believe we heard back that it is the non-reoccurring, if the item can't be repaired after a number of years, it's replaced. I think last week we were told that if the carpet is repaired a number of times, you might put in vinyl. So replacement of one attribute for another. Really, we just want light and we want transparency. What does a unit update mean and why was $729,000 spent on it? They also listed turnover cost of $134,000 in addition to decorating and another $81,000 of casualty loss. And now that one I had to actually look up because that was a unique expense. We don't see that reported by any other owners. As defined by the IRS, a casualty loss can result from the damage, destruction, or loss of your property from any sudden, unexpected, or unusual event, such as a flood, hurricane, tornado, fire, earthquake, or volcanic eruption. Casualty does not include normal wear and tear or progressive deterioration. Again, given that it's not a normative thing applied by other owners, we've never seen this before. That's another expense that the opponents are correct. We would exclude from a reconstruction of allowable expenses. You know, we literally heard that this morning that when we ask questions, we get answers. But you know, then the idea was, well, we asked too many questions. And so at what point do we get enough answers? But the point of these things is really to get a light, to cast light, illumination on what is going on with these properties. Why do the properties expenses increase by, you know, 572% increase in 2018, 572% increase just in subtotal for maintenance and repair. Now, as the appellants acknowledged in their email and is included in the our BOE package, at least 1.8 million of that was above and beyond what was expected at that property. That's why we reconstruct column E, column C. That's the same thing we do with column E. It's the same thing we do on a separate page. We have to have a reasonable explanation for what these expenses are so that we can determine what's an annual allowable expense and what's a capital improvement. We've done that. We do believe that based on this information, based on the lack of information, based on the lack of transparency, that the county's initial assessment should be confirmed at $130,115,000. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members? Mr. Hoffman.
What was the $945,000 miscellaneous repair for in 2020? The INE?
Asking me, Mr. Hoffman?
No.
What was reported to us was $134,000 in turnover costs, $728,257 in unit updates, $1,523 in capital costs, and $80,887 in casualty loss.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, we responded to that question with what that was.
Okay, I just couldn't. I was looking for it in the package. I didn't see it.
Okay, other questions? No? Okay, Mr. Chekas, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
And I apologize, I really didn't get into the numbers. I'm trying to, normally y'all know me as very number based. I think I just asked you to look through the due diligence that we do to try to get these answers. If you look at, I believe it starts on page 54 or 55, there's literally 5 or 6 pages of emails back and forth where we ask a question and, sometimes we'll say, what was the common area repair for common area things? So it's rather than sort of illuminate and cast, let there be no doubt of what these expenses are. It tends to be things we have to ask year over year. And as Mr. Bailey has pointed out, these are things that we've already asked on the initial INE statement. So contrary to what you've heard, it's not the way we've asked them to be filled out. We just want transparency. Given the lack of it, we do believe that our reconstructions are accurate and that they've excluded inappropriate and non-allowable expenses of capital nature. We do believe that the county should be confirmed at a value of $130,115,000. Thank you.
And just to point out on the numbers again, the actual original assessments NOI is lower than the 2019 reconstructed number, and it's in line with what the 2020 reconstructed number is, slightly less. So it's about 6.9 million when you look at our original NOI, and then the reconstructed 2020 operating year is around 6.9 million as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chitlick, if you take a minute to wrap up, sir.
Yeah, the reconstructed is Chris's take on what the owner is making, not what the owner's reporting. So again, we years ago came in with internal statements and they said, look, if you want this considered, put it on our form. We put it on their form. Mr. Hoffman just asked a question, I thought, to me of hey, what is these numbers? And Chris was able to answer it because he asked us and we answered it. But his whole 8 minutes was talking about how we never answer his questions, but we did answer his questions. The reconstruction of 3 years year over year, and now he's saying, well, we went the internal statement. The same statement they wouldn't look at in 2016 is what they now need in order to make this thing work. We're complying. I understand that there should be more transparency. There could be more transparency, and we're committed to do that and get that there. But the reconstructed number is really a wild guess. You have 3 years of actual reported here that's showing that the costs are higher. We told you in 15, 16, and 17 the costs are about to be higher. They became higher. In 18, we heard, yeah, but it's only 1 year. We need to see a trend. Now, 3 years later, when we see a trend, they said, yeah, but we reconstructed them back down. It's a bit frustrating. I understand it's frustrating for Chris and probably for you all, but it's extremely frustrating for me because the target keeps moving and it's moving back and forth. Chris asks questions, we answer them, and then all of a sudden he claims for 7 minutes we didn't answer the questions. But as he answered Mr. Hoffman, we did answer the questions. So it's just the numbers here show that a reduction is absolutely warranted. We're talking about a $410,000 per unit for this property, and the comparables indicate that it should be lower in the $350,000 per unit range.
Okay, thank you. It's just among the board members. I just want to start before we get into this to address a couple of comments that Mr. Chitlick made. I know that historically there's been some issues here about filling out the forms. We've heard about this and a lot of whining going back and forth today on this. Seems good that we're hitting the end of our agenda because I think patience is wearing thin. But, for years they didn't fill out the forms. And now you are filling out the forms, but just because you put the number on the form doesn't mean that that's the absolute truth. We see this all the time on folks that do fill out the forms, where the county goes through and says, oh, we're taking that off because it's a capital expenditure. We're taking this off for another reason. So just because the form is filled out doesn't mean it's gospel and that's going to be absolute. And we're going to base the factors, the final numbers on that. I mean, and you've been on both sides of the aisle and you know this. So to talk in your presentation to say, oh, we finally did what they're doing and now they're just backing it all off. It just seems, quite non-relevant to it. But that being said, we'll move along to see what other folks have to say on the case. Mr. Penranda.
No, I agree with you, Mary. I think you've said it. We hear all the time, well, like Ms. Ross said, we send it to the owner, they fill it out, and then we try to clarify. But if you provide the information more specific, it doesn't make sense, then yeah, I think Chris is doing the right thing, And just because you put external repair or lobby or something, you need to know specifically what it's for. So I'm okay with the revised assessment.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Yates?
I'm okay with revised assessment. And when you look at like 18 or whatever, and you're seeing a 50% for expenses is what's reported, I think there's some adjustment somewhere. They need to be, it's got to be revealed.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I'm okay with revised.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, you're all good with that? Then I'm going to move to accept the county's revised number of 130,115 even. Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and a second by Mr. Penranda. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. The county's revised number of 130,115 even is confirmed. That completes the agenda.
Board members.
Thank you.
Mr. Tiller. Thank you, Ms. Ross.
Does
Thank
any
you.
county or any of the board members have any additional business? Okay, I just want to alert that on tomorrow's agenda, the fifth case, it's BOE number 332, has a signed settlement agreement. So if you haven't read your cases, you don't have to read that one. So we'll be down to the 5 cases tomorrow. Anything else from anybody? No? Okay, then we stand adjourned at 10:45 and we will reconvene tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. for the final hearing date. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.